Well, after music like that, I really don't need to preach. I think we're done. We can all go home at this point. There are two things I must acknowledge right off the bat. The very first thing I must say about how to be a BUU is that there is no one way to be a black UU. If there are 50 black Unitarians in a congregation, then there are 50 potential ways to be a black UU. We are not monolithic. We are as diverse in what we feel, think, believe, and worship as any other group of people. When I hear someone say how hard it is to attract black people to our faith, I immediately want to remind them of how hard it is to attract white people to Unitarian Universalism. Which statement is true? Less than 1% of black Americans are members of UU congregations, or less than 1% of white Americans are members of UU congregations? How many of you think the first is true? Less than 1% of black Americans. How about the second? Less than 1% of white Americans. Yeah, well, that's right. Both are true. Both are true. So the next time you hear someone say some variant of "it's hard to get black people to come, join, or visit our congregation," remind them that the truer statement is it's hard to get people, period, to come, join, or visit. Don't believe your eyes. They are deceiving you. You think there are a lot of white people in this room? There's not a lot of anyone in this room. Yeah. Your eyes are playing tricks on your mind. But however many people of any kind are here, we must not forget that they are individuals and are here for their own unique reasons. Because even black people are diverse. I can't really say how to be a BUU. I can only speak my truth, how I have learned to be a BUU. This is one person's perspective, but then a religion with the audacity to call itself both Unitarian and Universalist. There's value in even the perspective of one. In addition to this first acknowledgement that I am only speaking my truth, let me also acknowledge that race and ethnicity within our faith movement are not binary. If you are a person of color who is not African American, it can be pretty annoying when we fail to acknowledge that there are more than two colors in God's palette. We want our faith to be a rainbow of people, but for us to get there, we have to remember there are more voices, more perspectives, more shades of humanity that have to be a part of this conversation. May the people of color in this room, of whatever hue or ethnicity, give me an amen. Amen. I look forward to the day when there are enough voices to make that a thunderous amen. We're not there yet, but we shall be. So I can't say how every person of color should find their way within UUism, and I can't say how every black person should find their way in this faith, but I can say how I have done so. And that is what I'm going to say now. How I have been a BUU. First and foremost, it has to be the only option available. It is that way for me, and has been since I discovered Unitarian Universalism, not in church, not in a religious service, but in a dusty old book, resting on a rarely visited shelf in my public high school library. I worked in the high school library, a perfect job for a bookish student. While shelving returned library books, I stumbled on the A to Z Dictionary of Religions and decided to start reading. It took a long time to get to the letter U. I actually skipped over Unitarian Universalism because Zoroastrianism, the only religion that came later in the book, sounded more interesting. So how do I know UUism is my only option? Because I've visited every other one. And it was the only one in the A to Z dictionary that struck a chord. Before I had even met my people, I knew I had found my people. And by that, I mean you. You are my only option. If you didn't exist, if UUCA ceased to exist, I would still be Unitarian Universalist. For better or for worse, it is what I am. Now, I've had other religious offers. Attractive offers, in fact. Even after I knew I was UU, I joined a black Christian church. Why would I do that? Well, one primary reason. The women were attractive. Yeah. I met my wife there. Now, I don't know if she was looking for me, but I was looking for her. And once I found her, we were out of there. I still find other churches attractive. Did you know that the First Congregationalist Church has jazz vespers? Did you know they have First Friday jazz concerts? That makes them very attractive to me. Which brings me to my second point about how to be a BUU. You will, from time to time, experience something akin to what we saw in the video clip. In being a BUU, you must accept that there will be times when you just won't get the music. And when you do get the music, you won't understand why people aren't up on their feet swaying and clapping. And when they are up on their feet swaying and clapping, you will wish that they would just stop. Now, why is that? Well, it's because you're trying to clap and they're throwing you off. And you're afraid you'll forget how to sway and clap altogether. BUUs clap on the 2 and the 4, and white UUs, or WUs, clap on the 1 and the 3. It is seemingly a law of human nature thus far unexplained by science. To be a BUU, this religion has to be the only option that resonates. You have to be tolerant of differing musical cultures, and number three, you have to be tolerant of white people. Now, let me give you a trigger warning. Will the congregation say, uh-oh? Uh-oh. I'm going to say something patronizing, and here it is. Some, not all, but some of the best white people I know are Unitarian, but they are still white people. They are not and are never going to be perfect. They're just going to be, by and large, better. As my grandmother used to say, God don't make no perfect white people. Can I get an amen? Amen? If you're under the illusion that God made perfect black people, I have but to point you to Justice Clarence Thomas. Housing and Urban Secretary Ben Carson, and Black Republican Senator Tim Scott. All intelligent and accomplished black men who I find deeply and tragically flawed, and all with whom I have not a single thing in common. Race ceased to be the most defining aspect of my identity the moment I tuned in to Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas's Senate confirmation hearings. It was a long time ago, but I remember it like it was only yesterday, because it was the moment for me when race and kinship were torn asunder. It is that way for many BUUs. We don't fit into every black crowd. Maybe we like Elton John and Johnny Cash. Maybe we like the opera and the ballet. Maybe we're just a little too much into Star Trek and fan fiction. Maybe like my daughter, punk rock changed our lives. Maybe we're just black and gay. It's no secret that when it comes to sexual orientation, African Americans make up one of the least tolerant communities in America. Whatever it is that makes us this way, conscious and proud as we are of being black, we BUUs are also conscious of being just a little different. different enough that we feel our greatest kinship in a place like this where outsiders are welcome. And so to be here and to be Black in this space, you have to be tolerant and sometimes forgiving of the imperfect people you are choosing to love. White UUs can be racist and not know it and not mean it. They can be patronizing and not know it and not mean it. They can be hurtful and not know it and not even understand it. They can be part of a system that oppresses and undermines and not know it and not understand it. My fellow BUUs, if you are looking for perfect white people, you will not find them here. And let me let you in on a secret. You're not going to find them anywhere else either. And so being a BUU means struggling with some of the same issues, struggling with the same challenges, struggling with the same indignities that we face in many other places that we go. And so being a BUU means being committed to that struggle, and so does being a WUU. BUUs and WUUs. Black and white UUs are a part of the same struggle, and it isn't easy for either of us. Now, I've been articulating what makes it hard for BUUs. Lest you think I'm unsympathetic, let me say a few words about what makes it hard for WUUs. I want to be fair. First, you have to learn to tell Black people apart. That isn't easy. We look so much alike. Trust me, so do you. If I can do it, you can too. Second, you have to learn to pronounce African names. Sometimes we like giving them to ourselves, but guess what? It's easier than German. They're all phonetic. Again, it's hard, but you can do this. Third, you have to experience us as individuals, not as a stereotype. If you've gotten to know one Black person, you've gotten to know one Black person. The next one will be something entirely different. That's what makes us so interesting. Fourth, you are going to have to learn how to talk to us. That isn't about being politically correct. It is about being respectful. And yes, if you disrespect me, I will call you out. That isn't about me being a snowflake. That's about you being rude. That isn't about me needing safe space. That's about this being my space, just as much as it's yours. And fifth, you have to learn to clap on the 2 and the 4. Okay, I'm asking too much. We'll let that one go.
Not too much.
But why should any of us, BUUs or WUUs, have to work this hard? Why in particular should we come to church just to work this hard? Now it's time for my second trigger warning. Will the congregation say again, uh-oh? Uh-oh. Yeah. I'm about to say something evangelical. Yeah. That is not the adjective that normally comes to mind when we think of Unitarian Universalism. But it is my belief that our faith, yours and mine, the faith of BUUs and WUUs, will save humanity. Will save humanity. And it's my evangelical belief that we ought to be proclaiming it to the world. If that is, we are not too distracted by our own unpleasant internal conflicts. Something unpleasant and distracting happened a few weeks ago near the end of General Assembly in Spokane, Washington. Reverend Todd Eckloff and members of his congregation, the UU Church of Spokane, began distributing a self-published and perhaps self-obsessed book he entitled The Gadfly Papers, 3 inconvenient essays by one pesky minister. Reverend Eckloff skewers what he perceives to be the suppression of ideas within our association of congregations, a suppression of ideas that subordinates our commitment to a free and responsible search for truth subordinates the right of conscience, subordinates the democratic process, subordinates all these core foundational principles of Unitarian Universalism to what he perceives to be a growing culture of political correctness and safetyism within our faith movement. I suspect Reverend Eckloff would sneer at my use of trigger warnings in this sermon, as well as my advice on how to be BUU and WUU. Reverend Eckloff's book is currently the most popular book on Unitarian Universalism that is selling on Amazon. However, there isn't much competition. Remember, we're less than 1% of pretty much everybody. So there are not a lot of UU books flying off the Amazon shelf. Now, my apologies to any self-published authors out there, but if we're being honest, we have to acknowledge that self-published books don't go through the fact-checking, the bone-crushing critique, and the mandated revision of a book that is read by an editing team at a publishing house. Having had 2 of my own book proposals rejected by our UU publishing house, and I can say, Oxford University Press is my publisher, so I know how to publish books. But my proposals have been rejected by Skinner House, so I can personally attest to just how high a bar one has to leap to publish within our faith tradition. Reverend Eckloff's book hasn't been through this kind of editorial review. In the absence of such a review, in that absence, most of us who do not have a UU theological education or are not UU historians will have no way of knowing whether what we read is truth, opinion, error, and we'll have little basis for judging how reasonable or how outlandish his opinions are. In its current form, Reverend Eckloff's book sounds rational, perhaps even to a fault, but it's unlikely to survive a Skinner House editorial review. But if he is serious, he owes it to himself and to us to write the book that will survive such a review. The Gadfly papers have drawn condemnation from many official UU quarters, including from people I know, trust, and respect. That's not surprising. Reverend Eckloff calls for an end to the UUA. Unitarians with whom Reverend Eckloff identifies should divorce Universalists, who Eckloff believes probably won't survive the breakup. But that's just too bad. 500 white UU ministers, including the ministerial intern at Reverend Eckloff's own church, have signed an open letter condemning the book for being harmful to marginalized people, for supporting rather than dismantling a culture of white supremacy within UUism, for being reactionary to the critique of racism, sexism, and ableism within our institutions, and for relying too much on logic and reason rather than the diversity of lived experience within our members. I wish the open letter from white UU ministers had said just a little more about Reverend Eckloff, the social justice activist. I wish the letter had mentioned his being fired from his job in Kentucky for standing against a statewide initiative opposing gay marriage, and his principled refusal to conduct weddings of any kind until gay marriage was made legal in America. Reverend Eckloff, the man, has vanished within the swirl of condemnation. But then again, he did choose the role of gadfly, and flies get swatted. I wish he'd made a different choice because his approach has cost him a seat at the discussion table, and perhaps even his ministerial standing. And we, as a faith movement, may be worse off for the loss of both. But there's one sentence I would like to quote from the open letter. 500 white UU ministers write, "What we wonder would be possible if the creative energy of our leaders were freed up from reacting to instances of resistance and harm, and instead were channeled into imagining, building, and experimenting with practices that embodied the kind of liberation and wholeness that is the core yearning of our faith." Our ministers wonder, but I don't wonder. I know. I believe that if we get over our preoccupation with ourselves just long enough to pay attention to what matters, we just might save the world. That's what this BUU believes. What matters is this: how people with differing beliefs, contrasting cultures, varying histories, alternative perspectives, and sometimes even conflicting needs. The problem of how such people can live together is central to our surviving in the modern world. And that is the core problem that our faith demands we confront. It is not the trivial that we are here to solve. Rather, it is what lies at the core of the human dilemma. Human beings have had trouble living with one another for as long as there have been human beings. But there has always been a frontier beckoning us, promising us relief from the people we loathe. From the birthplace of humanity in the plains of Africa, perhaps it was our desire to flee from one another that led us to populate the world. The problem is there are so many more of us now. We can no longer escape each other. We are more economically interconnected than ever before. War, poverty, crime, civil unrest displaced more people than ever before. What we see at our borders in America is replicated in many countries around the world, and increasingly, the migrating stranger is met with isolationism and xenophobia. Clones of Donald Trump are appearing in so many places that despots like Vladimir Putin have proclaimed the end of liberal democracy. What distinguishes conflicts of today is that they're unending, says Dimitrios Papadimitriou, co-founder of the Migration Policy Institute. None of the conflicts we see today are anywhere near being resolved, he says, because the resolutions are extremely complex. They involve religion, and they involve power. But I have faith in UUism, faith in the power of this late in the alphabet religion to guide us in overcoming the intractable. This is what we are here to do. This is what matters, not the trivia. We're not here to divorce, as Reverend Ecloff proclaims, but rather to come together, to wed in ways hitherto unimagined. BUUs and WUUs, Christians and Jews, mystics and humanists, Hispanics and gringos, gay and straight, cisgender and genderqueer. We UUs share this purpose, and we miss our destiny if we are too distracted by trivia to realize it. The choice to be here is fundamentally the choice to live with diversity, to live with difference, to participate willingly and commit fully to this social and cultural experiment on people coming together without one submitting to the other. We are here to make mistakes, to fight it out, to forgive and forget, to forgive and not forget, to learn to do community better, and to love one another through it all. We're here to find that more perfect union where those on the margins are drawn into the center and the center broadens to include all. This is the hard thing we willingly choose to do when we choose this faith over others. We are here to find that more perfect union where religious creeds, where economic greeds, where racial and ethnic breeds never get in the way of shared human needs. We are here to find that more perfect union that affirms, I am BUU, you are WU, and we have work to do. There is a world to save, and we are the people that can do it, the people that must do it, the people that will do it. That is my faith. That is my religion. That is being a BUU. Well, BUUs and WUs and whoever else you are, join in saying amen. Amen.
Stay on up, stay on.